This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Is this Keith Sims, the one I've known since the early 90s?
Hey, Big O, how you doing today?
That's definitely Keith Sims. That's Keith Sims' voice right there. All right, because somehow or another, Bill called another Keith or something, which is kind of crazy.
Suckered me, man.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I was sitting here waiting for you.
Yeah,
guys,
no,
so
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you. So I was just apologizing to the fake Keith that that you have suffered by knowing me for nearly 30 years. So I apologize for that, first of all.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
So Keith, how are you hanging in there, man? When you heard the news about Coach Shoes passing away, man?
I was pretty surprised and shocked. I mean, we all know he was getting up there in age, and at 90, that's a blessing to hit that number. But in our own family, my wife's grandmother just turned 99. So we have people in our family that are obviously that age and older. So it's still a shock. Such a great man, and to lose somebody like that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And I know that he's had a full life, which is something we all wish we had. When it first happened and you heard about it, what was your first memory that crossed your mind with Shoes?
Oh, there's so many. I think back to the draft because it just took place last week, and it was 30 years ago that I got the call from Coach Shula. And the first call I got was earlier in the morning. Him and Harvey Green called me, and the first thing he said to me was, "How much do you weigh, Sims?" Because he hadn't had an offensive lineman over 300 pounds, and that was a crazy draft year for anybody who remembers the 1990 draft. It was the first year that juniors were allowed to be in the draft, and that draft was dominated by news that morning about junior sale. But when Shula called me, everyone thought Richmond Webb was going to be taken 5th overall to the San Diego Chargers. And Miami, obviously, the offensive lineman, they had a 9th pick, and he called me to check my weight, and he said, well, if Richmond goes to San Diego, we're going to take you at 9, so you better keep your weight down. So, of course, getting a call like that from Coach Shula, I was ecstatic that I was going to be a Miami Dolphin. Well, lo and behold, the draft changed dramatically when Junior Seau comes out and says he's not going to go to Tampa Bay. If they draft him at 4, he'd go back to school, which then triggered a whole domino. Instead of San Diego taking Richmond, they took Junior Seau. Miami's sitting there at 9 saying, Richmond Webb, we got to take him, a tackle over a guard. And I ended up going to Miami in the 2nd round, which ended up being a blessing because I got to play for such a great organization, Hall of Fame coach with my buddy Richmond, who I was talking to today about the whole scenario. So that's a memory that kind of flooded back to me first when I heard that news.
When you think of Shula, is there anybody nowadays that even comes close that reminds you of him?
It's such a different era now for players and coaches. Shula had total authority within that organization to do what he needed to do. Players at that time, whether it was because of the salaries they were making or what have you, with lack of free agency, players didn't have the same power that they do today. So I think it'd be very difficult. I think it'd be next to impossible to duplicate what Coach Shula was able to do to coach for that many years in an organization through the ups and downs. And obviously he had some great ups, the 72 team and the 2 Super Bowl championships and 3 in a row. And so I don't know. I mean, Belichick has been on a tremendous run, but there's a lot of people that think there should be an asterisk by his name because of all the scandals he's on. Shula did all that greatness, 347 wins, without the scandals, without the cheating, without any of that stuff. So I think he will be unmatched forever.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Although I was having some fun with Richmond earlier, and I got to tell you, Flores reminded me a little Shula, man. I know it's way too early to say anything like that, but the fact that he tore it down, had so many young guys, and they were one of the least penalized teams, and the fact that they didn't screw themselves on a consistent basis, which is what you expect from expansion teams, young teams. It's normal for you to make mistakes and screw up. The fact that a Flores team showed that much discipline, that kind of reminded me of your guy.
Well, definitely. Coach Shula preached discipline, whether it be in practice. He didn't want you to make those mistakes, and certainly not in a game. And you mentioned Coach Flores. He's made me even a more staunch Dolphin fan because of what he was able to do last year. And I truly believe in the organization. Once again, I believe in direction. I'm all in on what their plans are. I mean, I'm ecstatic that we've hopefully got our quarterback for the next 15 years in Tua. Watching him, living in Georgia most of the time, I get a lot of Alabama football up here. And obviously Georgia, I'm 25 miles from the University of Georgia, so the Bulldogs are huge. So that rivalry has been insane the last couple of years. So I'm well aware of his talents, his charisma, and I'm looking forward to what he can do and bring to the Dolphin Nation. I mean, I wear my Dolphin stuff proud, but now it's even more fun to wear it around here in Georgia, wear that Dolphin gear.
Well, Keith, admit it. All the guys that we had before, they had no plan. There was no rhyme or reason. It changed from one day to another. These guys took over, and they said, no. We're not doing all the stuff that they did in the past. We're tearing it all down. We're going to get rid of everybody. We're going to build through youth. We're not tanking. We're building through youth. But, of course, the agenda out there and all those people that thought they were tanking, they look really stupid because they noticed, oh, wait a minute, they are trying to win, but with young guys. And now that what they do, they have built up in free agency and in the draft. Oh, wait, they're building from the inside out. They're building up the O-lines and D-lines. Wow, what a concept. It just looks like real football people actually are running this thing. Not a bunch of, let's go find this shiny object and let's go buy the most expensive free agents. And that's the way to solve. That's our panacea. No, man, there's no panacea. You got to get blue collar. You got to, tear it down to the bone. It just looks like real football people are running it now. That's what it looks like.
I think it's a lot easier for us fans and even us alumni to look at the blueprint, and we're not privy to every step of it. So we just see the final results. But you can look at it and say, hey, they did have a plan. I mean, I honestly sat here during football season, I'm like, why are they trying to win? Aren't they trying to get the best pick they can for the highest ranked quarterback? But they end up getting the guy who I personally wanted them to get all along. Now, hopefully he will pan out. Hopefully he'll stay healthy. But he's got all the intangibles, all the tools for all of us to look at and say, that should be a success. And then, like you mentioned, not only did they get a quarterback, but they invested not just in free agency, they invested in the draft to bring in the big guys behind that line of scrimmage to protect them both on the offense and defense side of the ball. It looks like the blueprint is they're building something that will be a decade of success, not trying, like you said, to go out and buy the top free agents and kind of piecemeal it together. They did a total strip down, and I believe, and I got my fingers crossed, that what they have done is going to set us up for success for the next decade and beyond in this organization, which these fans, we all are anxious and deserve to see our Dolphins in the national argument and heading toward a Super Bowl, competing for that on a yearly basis like it used to be.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm 1,000% with you. I just see real football people. So, Georgia boy, tell us about Robert Hunt. Well, so tell me, do you like this guy?
It's interesting. I haven't done that much. I could bullcrap you and talk it, but I honestly don't know that much about him in that regard. I'm not. My wife's still a Florida State Seminole, so we've been down for a couple of years, and of course, my Cyclones, Iowa State, has done well. So I'm more involved in following what they do than necessarily Georgia because we're close by. But
how about the Kinley kid? How about the Kinley kid? At least you saw him. So out of the two guards, okay, I figured Louisiana football you're not watching a lot of, but at least the Kinley kid out of Georgia, you saw him. And by the way, he's got a great personality. We just had him on last week. Loved him. So what do you think about Kinley at least?
I think he's a mauler. He's a huge guy. I think he's like 330 pounds. I mean, they touted that offensive line for the University of Georgia last year as the biggest in the nation, that they were going to help Jake Fromm, and that running game has been successful. I mean, playing the SEC is a tough battle. They've done a great job, and I think it's a matter of the transition. Can he make that transition from a run-oriented, pass-laden offense to a pro-style offense? I think he can. There's always going to be a learning curve for NFL linemen coming from college to the NFL. It is very difficult to go from a college scheme to step in and playing effectively. You saw that last year with the draft picks. Yes, you can come in and you can be a body, but are you a successful, positive addition to the team, or are you just taking up space while you're learning on the job? Now, playing in the SEC, will you have a bigger learning curve or a lesser learning curve? That I don't know. It depends on the offensive scheme and what the Dolphins want to do. I believe the Dolphins are going to want to improve their running game next year and moving forward. So I think it'll help them there. But it's also a matter of pass protection. I honestly, and Richmond and I talk about this all the time, we watch some of these games, and I'm shocked at how poorly these offensive lines in the NFL can protect their quarterback and pick up stunts. It is baffling to us. We were able to do it as rookies. Why can't they? But I'm not going to put that on them. They've got to mature and develop in their own time. But I think the numbers and the experience he brings from the SEC and all the draft picks will bode well for the Dolphins. Competition is key, and they've got competition on offensive line now.
The great Keith Sims joining us here on the program, and you can follow him on Twitter, by the way, like I and so many others do at KSims69. Keith, what's your favorite Don Shula moment as a player?
I mean, for me personally, I can remember after I got drafted in probably my second year in the league, I was talking to Shoes. We were coming off the field, and he kind of pulled me aside for a second. He said, Sims, what kind of player do you want to be? And I'm like, well, I'm a starter. I said, I want to be a Pro Bowler. And he looked me dead in the eye, just like Shula could do it. He said, you know what? I'm going to hold you to that standard. From this day forward, I want you to practice and be a Pro Bowler every single day you step on the field. I'm like, okay. So I worked. And after my third season, we were walked in the meeting room. And this is going back to me when the Pro Bowl really meant something. When you were elected, and nothing against the fans, but when you were elected by your peers and by the head coaches in the league, and there weren't second, third, or fourth alternates. I was an alternate twice and never made it. But I was there 3 times when I was elected, and I walked in that meeting room, and they were announcing the Pro Bowl picks, and Shula announced, Marino and Richmond Webb, and then he paused for a second, and he said, I'm really happy to announce this guy. And he said, Keith Sims, you're a Pro Bowl. And my heart was 1,000 times bigger. I was so happy and elated that I had finally achieved that goal. And from that day forward, my relationship with Coach Shula changed. It was like I finally got to the point of he respected me because I had stated publicly to him what I wanted to be, and he had pushed me to get to that level. And I knew what it took to get to that level, and he knew he could count on me to be that kind of player on Sunday. And that was a different kind of relationship. It was a special relationship.
That's a great story right there, because that psychological approach to it was so smart on his part, because it's what you want. So now it allows him to push you to that level, because deep down inside, he knew you were a Pro Bowler. He wanted you to say it. So then that way you're both on the same page. And when he's pushing you, you know what he's pushing you to. So there's a connection and a communication there and a bridge that obviously led to success.
It did. And I'm not going to ever say it was easy under Coach Shula.
Of course.
But just having his respect. You perform, he knows he can count on you, and he didn't have to nag you for the little things. I mean, that's one of the things I loved about Coach Shula. He treated you like a man. Hey, this is what you're supposed to do. I expect you to do it. And when you don't, I'll be calling you in my office. But once you are, I'm going to leave you alone and let you do what you need to do.
I got to say something also that stands out, and I'm sure you had those moments where you saw somebody else that way. But the thing that always stood out when, as a reporter, when you walked in there, you usually dealt with smart dudes, right?
Yeah.
And, Keith, obviously you're smart. Richmond's smart. When we would run into a guy that wasn't very smart, Earthquake Blake or something, guys that weren't necessarily the brightest bulb in the chandelier, did you know right away they were going to struggle on this team because of that guy, that he required intelligence, he required you to use your mind as much as your muscles?
I think particularly on the offensive line, and I'm just going to speak on that area. The Dolphin offense was very complex, and it didn't take long for us to weed out the guys who couldn't do it. I remember we called a running play in practice one day, and you brought up a name I hadn't thought about in a long time, Earthquake. But it was called for me to pull to the right. Eddie was playing the right guard at that spot, And at that point, that play, I pulled, he pulled. We obviously ran into each other. And I was just like, how dumb can you be? I mean, and I don't want to talk so disrespectfully to them, but it was that it didn't take long for the coaches and the players to say, you know what, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it in this offense. And nobody was put on the field if they were a liability mentally, particularly on the offensive line, when your job was to protect Dan Marino. It just wasn't going to happen. So we could tell pretty quickly that there was a mistake in the drafting of the earthquake there.
Yeah. And physically, the good Lord gave him every ability to be a Pro Bowler, right? In that league, right?
He could lift the gym, 500-plus pounds bench press. He was pretty quick for his size and nimble. But, again, if you can't think in the split second, you certainly couldn't play in our Dolphin offenses.
Yeah. No, I mean, overall, as a fan and even as a media member, you always knew that your teams that's what reminded me a lot of Shula and Flores this past year, that with very little talent, his team very few times burned themselves, set themselves back or whatever. They committed very little mistakes, and that's why they won 5 games, because they at least gave themselves a fighting chance by not committing a ton of turnovers or stupid penalties. It's amazing how many games you have a chance to win in the NFL when you don't turn over the ball and you don't burn yourself, right? That's all you got to do right there. That's it.
That is something that all the Coach Shula preached that all the time. Jimmy Johnson used to preach all the time, the turnovers, the mistakes, the hidden yardage within a game that people don't realize happens. You make one mental mistake and it could kill a drive, and you only get 11 drives, 10 to 12, 13 drives per game. You cannot afford to make those mistakes, and good teams don't beat themselves like that.
How did Shula walk the fine line of motivation and intimidation? Because there's a level of intimidation that comes with Shula. You felt it as a player. Hell, you felt it as a reporter, dude. When you're around him, you had to ask him the right question. You needed to know your stuff because he was going to challenge you and crush you right there in front of everybody. So what was that fine line that he walked between motivation and intimidation?
I think every player realized or found out pretty quickly that you didn't want to take that walk upstairs to Coach Shula's office. I took a couple of those because as a young player, they say I had a big mouth. I talked a lot to the press, and he didn't like that. He made it clear very early on that wasn't going to fly under his regime. But I think the thing is that players realize the most is we all were not treated the same, and that's okay because those players – I was never treated like Dan Marino was, and I shouldn't have been treated like Dan Marino was. Dan Marino was a Hall of Fame quarterback. He was the key cog in our team. So by him ascending to that position, he got certain things that the rest of us didn't, and that's okay. But that was a motivating factor, like I said, to get from, hey, you're on the team to being, okay, you're a starter, from a starter to you're a good player to you're a great player. You were treated differently on those levels, and it gave you motivation to get there. Coach Shula never said anything, never said a word about it, but you saw it. You craved it. You desired it, and you worked your butt off to move up to those levels. I can remember rookie year, I hung out with Clayton a little bit. He picked me up. We had to go to the doctor one day, and we went. And he was like, let's go to lunch. I'm like, what about practice? Like, I don't worry about that. We got back. He went in the meeting room and nothing. I got back. I got yelled at for 20 minutes. You're not Clayton. You can't do that. And that's okay. I learned early. You want those perks under Coach Shula, you work your tail off, and you become the player he needs you and wants you to be. And then you can get those perks. So I think that was one of those factors, how he motivated players, was the way he treated us all. Now, it wasn't disrespectful to any other player on the team, but you wanted to aspire to be one of the best players on the team.
Who's the guy that got probably the biggest rip job from Shula you'd ever seen?
Oh my goodness! Oh, that's a tough one. I think
many.
And I think that's one of the things that I think he did really well. When he ripped you, it typically wasn't in front of the whole team. I don't remember people getting undressed in front of the whole team. I remember getting undressed in his office over something I said, but he did it in a way where he could break you down, but it didn't jeopardize your position on the team, if that makes any sense. And I think that was a skill set, and he was masterful in. manipulating and controlling the different facets of the team, because it's tough. You think about those teams and all the different personalities, and you're letting certain players get away with something or take it easy in this particular area because you knew you could count on them, when others you were driving to be, perfect in practice every day. That's a tough juggling act. I think he was a master of that.
That's that is one special person, and I was talking about this, Keith, that it's great to be Shula for you as a player because you had success under him, for us as fans because we enjoyed that success. But man, the standard he set that then everybody else has to follow. It's like whenever Riley steps down, whoever takes over for the Heat now has to follow that tenure, which is going to be near impossible to match. And that's the thing with Shula. He sets such a standard that, if your team is constantly making mistakes and undisciplined, we're going to go, well, that's not the way Shula did it. And if your team is not smart, we're going to say, well, Shula's players most of the time were the smartest guys on the field, that kind of stuff. All these things that were just staples of what he set up and a standard that he set up, that he makes it near impossible for the people that follow him to maintain it, man.
He does. It would be tough. But like you said, I believe Coach Flores is in that mode and has the ability to be that type of leader. But remember, Coach Shula has left us with perfection. Only team ever, and it's still unmatched.
Yeah. That in itself right there, hopefully, will never be matched. That way, he stands alone forever up in the clouds, and the good Lord got himself a good one now with Don Shula by his side. Keith Sims, you can follow him on Twitter, the Dolphin Great at KSims69. Keith, I appreciate you taking some time, my friend. Look forward to seeing you down here during a Dolphins game because there's a lot of winning coming up, baby.
Yes, there will be. Stay safe, everyone.
You got it. You be safe out there, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got it.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right, there you go. The great Keith Sims, man. He is just absolute pure class. Love having Keith Sims on.